Well, over the course of the last 2 years doing this show, we have been very critical of much of what's gone on within our education system. My view that our kids are being, from a very early age, right the way through university, being indoctrinated. But this is a new one on me. It's the concept of sanctuary schools. Charlie Peters, our investigative reporter, will tell us all. Charlie, what have you found?
We've been looking into this network called the Schools of Sanctuary Network. It's part of a wider thing called the City of Sanctuary Charity. Now, it campaigns against what it describes as hostile immigration rhetoric and policies. It's a network of over 400 schools across Britain where it describes itself as engaging in collaboration and understanding between school children and refugees. It says its work is completely non-political. However, GBNews has looked through the schools involved in that 400-strong family and found evidence of some controversial actions, activities and engagement by these schools. In one example, a school in Lewisham conducted a march on Whitehall after the Schools of Sanctuary Network encouraged them to speak up against the government's illegal migration bill. In a nursery in Brighton in Sussex, we heard that nursery toys were reordered in order to, quote, fit the experience of colour. Another example, staff at a nursery were boasting towards the Schools of Sanctuary Network that they'd put their staff through unconscious bias training, anti-racism training. And finally, we also saw some examples of schools engaging in activities described by the Schools of Sanctuary Network as befriending days, where refugees and asylum seekers were invited to meet with school children. In one school we saw, the local town council had actually spent taxpayers' money to engage and support that event.
Clearly overtly political. Miriam Cates MP for Penistone and Stocksbridge. I'm kind of, Charlie says all this and I'm kind of not even surprised.
Yes, I agree. I've not heard of this specific example before, but I'm very well aware of other ideologies being pushed in schools, gender ideology, critical race theory. And I think this speaks to a much wider picture, doesn't it? And in a democracy, making sure children are not politically indoctrinated is a basic foundation. It's a foundation stone of any democracy that parents can send their children to school and know they're going to be taught to read and taught to write, but not indoctrinated with controversial political ideas. And I think once upon a time, we might have thought that not indoctrinating children meant don't say to children vote Conservative or don't say vote Labour. Yeah. But actually the contest now is around ideas and the thoughts about immigration, about gender. These are the politically contested space. And it's absolutely wrong and probably illegal for schools to be putting these points of view.
Now, is it illegal? Is it illegal?
Well, I think it is, because the Education Act makes very clear that you cannot indoctrinate a child. And these specific issues are politically controversial, they are political. You cannot present those ideas to children.
But Charlie Peters keeps finding examples of this that are happening. And Miriam, with respect, you guys have been in power for 13 years. And this level of indoctrination has accelerated during that time. What's wrong with your party?
Well, what's wrong with the Western world, Nigel? Because I don't want to make too many excuses for my party.
Let's focus on your party.
I do agree. There are no excuses. We should have sorted this out. But if you do look more broadly around the West, these ideologies have taken over educational establishments across the West. It's not just in this country. But I think there's several problems here. Firstly, is a complete inability to recognise this as political. Now, you and I know that most people in the country think that immigration is too high. That's our position. But many people...
The polling in the Sunday Times yesterday was overwhelming.
Is absolutely incontrovertible. But lots of people working in schools and in left-wing establishments and universities think that it's the other way around, that all people want more immigration and they think it's okay to tell children about this and to make them see that this is a big moral problem, that we need more immigration. So I think there's a genuine failure to recognise this as controversial. But I also think there's just a total lack of enforcement in this area, because Ofsted inspect schools and they say, okay, you're passing your maths GCSE, you're passing your English, but they don't look at all at these kind of issues. Are there political issues in school? And I asked on the Education Committee a few weeks ago the soon-to-be head of Ofsted, what have you done about this? And he said, I've never seen this in my career. How can you not have seen this?
Isn't the truth of it that Boris Johnson, the posh boys, stayed in control of the Conservative Party, they're metropolitans, they're politically correct, they didn't have the guts to take these issues on?
Well, I do think... certain members of the political establishment, if you like, think it's unsavoury.
In your party?
In my party and in others, think it's unsavoury to take this on. I do think that's true. It is quite difficult to talk about. We've seen what happens to people when they do speak it out about these issues, and I'm sure that is a big part of it. But, we can't leave this any longer. We have to sort it out. And, there are an increasing number of MPs speaking up on this. We are pushing for guidance in schools, but at the moment, as you say, it seems to be getting worse.
Yep, and frankly, I don't think a Labour government will make it any better. It may make it marginally worse, but it's difficult to tell, frankly, between the two. Charlie Peters, what do the schools of sanctuary say?
Schools of Sanctuary said that they reject any claim that this is political work, that they are a network that engages in understanding and collaboration. And while we're hearing about how many MPs are, of course, resisting the spread of progressive ideologies in schools, we do know that the Schools of Sanctuary is reliant on funding from grants and NGOs to sustain its work. It received £50,000 from the Paul Hamlin Foundation, a pro-migration campaigning group. Last year, the Paul Hamlin Foundation had recently received £1.36 million in government grants. So there is a case possibly here to say that the government is, while it says it's opposing progressive ideologies in schools, through the back channels of money, supporting this work.
And the sadness for me here in Manchester is that Miriam and what she stands for is actually where most Conservative members are at this conference, where most Conservative voters are, where a majority of parents are in this country. The sadness is that Miriam is actually in a minority in her own parliamentary party. I'm not going to allow her to answer that. Because she can't. She knows I'm right, aren't I?
Well, if you will allow me to have the last word, we had a rally this afternoon for the New Conservatives rally for the manifesto. And the biggest cheer was for Nick Fletcher, who said that parents should have the legal right to see what their children are being taught in schools. And that was the biggest cheer of the whole event. And it is starting to capture the grassroots.
There's no problem with the Conservative membership. That wasn't what I was talking about. It was the MPs. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.